So, Jay, when we talk about CLM and PKI in general and certificates, we often find ourselves discussing it in the context of its critical role to security.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that's neglected a lot is its critical role to business continuity and uptime.
Yeah. Operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, we always say, oh, we need the cryptography. Without the cryptography, everything gets broken. It's a security function. But the real world consequence of that, once we require the cryptography and once we require the digital identity and authentication, which we do, is that in the absence of those things running correctly, what actually happens is stuff stops running.
Yeah. In other words, Tim, I think what you're saying, you can't have a governance program without visibility. The capstone of Certificate Lifecycle Management. Yeah. We just had a good readout, Tim. One of our most favorite episodes from our listeners is the mapping of Certificate Lifecycle Management to NIST CSF, Cybersecurity Framework 2.0.
Yep.
We just did an episode recently about DORA and NIS 2, where uptime, business continuity was written throughout those guidance documents. And it was mapped directly to Certificate Lifecycle Management. Uptime and business continuity, ironically, might not be thought about enough in terms of Certificate Lifecycle Management, even though it is one of its critical functions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, if you really think about how this plays out in reality, where security failures have occurred because of certificate mismanagement or lack of renewal have been because the protections had an uptime problem, right? So I have a system in place that prevents a certain attack, and I fail to renew a certificate. And because of that, the system goes down. And because of that, a breach occurs, right? So the breach is the consequence of an outage. The problem is the outage. The outage occurs because certificate management doesn't occur correctly. So when you start to looking at an automated, visible, policy-based, software-based management system that does your renewal and your deployment and tracking and all of the stuff that a CLM does, what you get out of it, pragmatically speaking, is you get resilience, uptime, business continuity. Those wind up being the primary benefits to the organization. And then those take a variety of forms, which includes uptime for your security measures.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental
right
aspect of certificate lifecycle management.
And so now what are the consequences of this? Well, the consequences of this are a bunch of things. When you're doing your ROI analysis, you don't only want to think about it in terms of the office of the CISO. You do want to think about that, but you want to think about it in terms of how it affects your operations. When you're looking at potential problems that come from a lack of automation or lack of, correct renewal, you want to think about those outages. When you're working on your processes and your policies, you want to be thinking about certificate renewal and uptime in terms of what do I need to do to maintain the number of nines I need to maintain. So in all of these ways, it's very important to understand that CLM is a major enabler of high uptime and predictable, resilient digital processes.
Absolutely agreed.
Yeah.
So Tim, I'm going to step back a whole bunch.
Okay.
And I'm going to state something that might seem obvious or not.
Okay.
And I think isn't said enough. Mm-hmm. Certificate Lifecycle Management does have a relationship to security.
Yeah.
And there's a core aspect of security. Security means a lot of things.
Right.
One of the core things about security that is not mutually exclusive, that certificate lifecycle management is also related to is identity.
Sure.
Security,
Yes.
identity, and operations.
Right. And by the way, identity is also necessary for security, right? Because all these things are all tangled into each other.
They don't,
Yeah.
they are not mutually exclusive of each other.
Right.
They're all tangled in each other. We can even call out privacy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We can even call out privacy as
For
a
sure.
fourth one.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic, Tim. But I'm in complete agreement. It is not just security. It is not just identity. It is absolutely operations.
Right. 100%. So anyway, that's just my soapbox for the day. We all tend to think of this as a security category, and rightly so. But it would be equally true and equally fair to describe it as an operations category, an uptime category, a business continuity category. That I think is absolutely 100% as true.
I'm going to say one last thing before we end.
Sure.
I think it's fair to say that it is fun. If you strip out the certificate from Certificate Lifecycle Management,
Okay.
it is fundamentally operations.
Yeah.
And everything else about identity comes from the key pair, the cert, and security past that.
I think that's smart, Jay, to look at it that way. Think of it as an operations tool that enables identity, security, cryptography, and these essential services that we require.
I'm glad we landed there.
All right. I love it.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jay.